show you that the vertices are the same with whatever method you choose. So we did negative b over 2a. What would negative b be?
Negative 4.
Negative 4. And what is 2 times a? 2. So my x value of my vertex is negative 2. And then what do I do to find the y value? Plug it back in. So when I plug in negative 2, I get 4, and then minus 8 plus 5. So 4 minus 8 would be negative 4, plus 5 would be 1. So that's your vertex. Is that what you guys got? Okay. So today we're going to start with this as our first example. I'm going to tell you that even if you're not a note taker, you need to write down the steps that I give you because you're going to want to refer back to them as you do your work today. So grab some notes for 4.2, I think it is. Writing in vertex form. So we've got this today, then we've got 4.3, and then our test will be on Tuesday. 4.2, writing in vertex form. So this is just another method to be able to graph quadratics. Vertex form is the very first form we use to graph. And it's this one right here with the A, the H, and the K, which is, in my opinion, the easier way to graph because you just have to look at the shift and then say if it's open up or open down. This is vertex form. This is standard form. This is what we worked on at the end of last week. This is standard form. We're today going to start in standard form and write it in vertex form, and then you can graph from vertex form. Okay? So, we're going to start with actually our first, I'm going to start with that as our first example. I'll give you a minute to get caught up. And I'm going to say one more time, if you don't have these steps written down, you're going to be lost when you go to do your work, especially tomorrow when you have a night to sleep on it. So make sure you at least write my steps down. So we're going to start with, we know this is A, B, and C, right? So step 1 is to move the C term to the other side. So our C term is plus 5. So how do I move a positive 5? Subtract it to the other side. So when I subtract that to the other side, I get y minus 5 equals x squared plus 4x. Okay, good? Okay, step 2 is a two-parter. With the problem that we have today, we only have to do one of the two parts, but I'm going to put both of them in this example so you have all your notes together. Step 2 is to factor out the A term, and then this next part's not going to make sense till we do it, but write it down. And put in plus blank. So in this case, what is the A term? It's 1. So when we factor out 1, it doesn't change anything. So when the A term is 1, you don't have to do this first part, which makes our problem a lot easier. Our next one, I'll make sure the A is not 1. But this first part you don't have to do. So all we have to do is put in the plus blank. And here's what this means. You're going to just write in y minus 5 plus blank. I'm going to put in a placeholder equals x squared plus 4x plus blank. That's all you're doing. So I know it doesn't make sense, but there's just a placeholder for we're going to manipulate the problem so that we can put it into vertex form. Okay, so we didn't have to do the first part. We'll do that on the next example, but we put in our plus blanks on both sides. So to fill in the plus blank, your next step, step 3, is to, and I'll move this up, divide the b term by 2 and square it. Okay, again, this might not make sense, but just write it down and I'll show you. I'm just going to rewrite the problem. So what is the b term for this problem? Where is it?
4.
The 4 and the 4x, okay? So we're going to take and do a little work here, and you guys can just watch me for now because I'm going to show you a little shortcut trick that works every time. We're going to take this b term here, and we're going to divide it by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. We're going to fill in this side as 2 squared. I'm not going to actually square it out because it's going to be a little shortcut here in a minute. But then on this side, I have to fill in, because we've got an equation. So I've just added 4, basically, to this side, 2 squared. So what do you suppose I have to put in the other blank? 2 squared. But we're actually going to figure that out. We're not going to put 2 squared. We're going to figure out the actual number. So what I would put here is a 4. So this side, we leave it in parentheses. I know this is going to seem really strange until we do a couple of them. Because my next step, it's a little shortcut for my next step. So that you keep in parentheses. The other side, the left-hand side, you're actually going to figure out what it is. Okay? Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
I know it's not super clear, but I promise it will be by the time you leave. Okay. Next step, what number are we on? Step 4?
4.
4. Step 4, we're going to simplify the left side and factor the right side. So simplifying the left side is very easy. It's just combining these like terms. So -5 plus 4 is going to be what?
-1.
So it's going to be y minus 1 on the right side, or the left side. The right side, everybody don't write, just watch. I'm going to justify why my shortcut works, but you don't have to do all this work. If I have this trinomial here, x squared plus 4x plus 4, I'll just go ahead and square it out. If I were to do the x method, blah, 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 this works out to be x plus 2 times x plus 2. Everybody agree with me? 2 times 2 is 4, 2 plus 2 is 4. This is the same thing as saying x plus 2 quantity squared, which kind of looks like the x minus h quantity squared that we have in vertex form. This is what we're trying to get to. This will always factor down like this. I'm sorry, it's going to be low because I need to have this on the screen. This will always factor to be an x, and then the quantity is squared. And then the number that you put with the x is always going to be this number in here. So is everybody looking at this shortcut? This will always be the number that it factors to. If you don't believe me, you can work this out and factor it and do the x method every time. But it will work out to be this number goes here when we go to factor it in quantity squared. That's why I left it in parentheses, so that you could always see what number goes into your factor. Because sometimes you end up with fractions, and then it gets all crazy. Okay, last step is to solve for y. So step 5 is solve for y, which means adding this 1 to the other side. So I get y equals x plus 2, quantity squared, plus 1. And now we've gone from standard form, like what we had for the bell ringer, into vertex form, like what we had when we first started graphing these last week, or 2 weeks ago. So here, what does this shift plus 2 inside tell you? Go -2. And then what does the plus 1 tell us? Up 1. So my vertex here is -2, 1, which is exactly what you guys found when you did the bell ringer by doing -b over 2a.
Oh my.
Wow.
I think the other was
Yeah.
It depends. There's times that it is. That's why I'm giving you options, because there's some that this would be easier. When you get, there's times that you have to use this process for other things next year. So that's why I teach this process. I like this way better because you get good at it. It gets fast. You do the shortcut. It's done. So don't throw it out yet. Give it a chance till we do a couple more. Okay? Because sometimes that -b over 2a turns out to be fractions, and then plugging a fraction back in, it's more difficult than doing this way. But I agree. Everybody thinks differently. Okay, let's do one with the a term is not 1, just for fun. I'll still make it easy. So y equals 2x squared plus 8x plus 7. I'm going to tell you not to skip ahead of me on this one, and then the next one you can skip ahead of me because there's something special you have to do in this one because the a term's not 1, and it's not just factoring out. So step 1, I'm not going to write the steps, so I'm going to go a little faster this time. Step 1 is move what?
The
C term. So I've got y minus 7 equals 2x squared plus 8x. Everybody good with that? Okay. The second one is the two-parter. We have to factor out the a term on the right and then put in our plus blanks. So I have y minus 7 plus blank equals, you're not factoring the x value, you're just factoring the a value, the number. So I'm taking the 2 out, and that's going to leave me with x squared plus 4x plus blank. This is the first place people get in trouble with this, is they forget to factor the 2 out of this b term. So make sure you factored it out of both terms. So I just divided 2 out of both of them and put them out front. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So if I factored this back in, I would go back to 2x squared and 8x. Okay? What's the next step on our list?
Divide b by 2 and square.
Okay, so here's where I need you to pay attention. In fact, let's not write. Let me write, and then I'll give you a chance to catch up. So we're going to take this 4 and divide it by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I told you to leave this like this. 2 squared, right? Because that's going to be our shortcut at the end when we go to factor. To fill in the other side, there's an extra step. What is 2 squared? 4. So that's here. If I were to distribute this 2 back in here, what do I really have here?
8.
An 8. So before you can fill in this side, because remember we've got a balance, it's equal to each other. So if I have an 8 that I just filled in on this side, I have to fill that in on this side. So the way you determine what to fill in is you actually square it out like we did. Then you take this and multiply it by your a term, and that's what you fill into the other side. We didn't have to do that before because our a term was 1. It didn't change anything. We didn't factor anything out. It wasn't affecting our balance. This one, when you have an a term out, you have to take this 4, multiply it by the a, and then fill in the other side. That's the second most common mistake. People forget to do that, which our lesson today, you're going to have 3 problems to try in class, so I'm not going to overload you with these yet. Tomorrow I will. So our last step is to simplify the left side, which is y plus 1. Factor, I'm air quoting factor because we're just going to use our little shortcut. Factor the right side. So we have a 2 out front. We have this quantity squared. What number am I putting in here with the x?
2.
What kind of 2? Positive 2.
Why is it a positive 2?
Because 4 divided by 2 is a positive 2. If I would have had a negative 4 divided by 2, that would have been a negative 2. And then our last step is to subtract 1 over. So I've got y equals 2 times x plus 2 quantity squared minus 1. So if I wanted to graph this, my vertex would be at -2, -1, and it would be a little narrower because of the 2.
So our answers will not
Yep, that's what we're getting to, is into vertex form. Okay, I've got one more I want to do together. Then I've got one I want you to do on your own with me. But this one I want to do because it's got some negatives. And I don't want to trip you up when you start going on your own. Well, here it is. Okay, so y equals negative x squared plus 4x minus 5. Okay, first step is to do what? So I move my c. So I have y plus 5 equals negative x squared plus 4x. What's the a term that I have to factor out?
-1.
Negative 1. If it would have just been a 1, I don't have to do anything. But a negative 1 is not a 1. So I have to factor a negative 1 out, which leaves me with x squared. And then what happens to this plus 4x?
2x.
No?
Or no?
I'm
Negative.
factoring out a negative 1.
Negative 4.
Negative 4x. And then I've got my plus blanks that I have to fill in. So when I factored out this negative 1, I'm just dividing both these by a negative 1. Which is why the actual numbers didn't change, just the signs. Okay, you guys want to try this to the end?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start my work here in a minute so you can follow me.
You have to put that 1 in front of the parentheses at all, or does it matter if I could just use negative?
You can just do the negative. Okay, let's look to see, and I'll finish mine up.
I got a question real quick.
Yeah.
Why is it negative 4?
Because I had to multiply it by a negative 1. So
I didn't-
I have negative 4 divided by 2, which is going to give me a negative 2.
Mhm.
So negative 2 goes in the parentheses here, squared. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4,
Oopsie.
times a negative 1 is a negative 4 on the other side. So on the left-hand side, I have y plus 1. And then on the right-hand side, to factor, I have that negative 1, or that negative sign out front. And then I have x minus 2 inside. And then what's my last step?
Move the 1.
Move the 1 over. So I've got y equals negative x minus 2 squared minus 1.
Can't you? Or, no, never mind. I was asking if you could combine those
No.
two, but
No. Yes. Okay, Austin, put your phone away, please.
Okay, how? I left out a negative.
Oh, okay. That negatives, the reason I did this one is because negatives are tricky. Okay, you ready to try one from start to finish? I won't make it negative, but I am going to make an A term. Good? Okay, start to finish. Everyone in here. Everyone can do it. I know you can. Y equals 2x squared plus 8x plus 3. I'll start my work here in just 1 second. So if you're stuck, you can check with mine. We got mine.
I think math.
Yeah. I'm a math teacher. Okay, so I got y equals 2 times the quantity x plus 2 squared minus 5. Good? I see some head nods. For those who are not, go back and check and make sure you factored out of both a and b. Take the b and divide by 2. You get 2. So 2 is what goes in the parentheses. So this 2 here is this 2 here. 2 squared is 4. Don't forget to stop off and multiply by 2 before you fill in the other side. So this should be an 8 on this side. Combine like terms, you get a 5. Factor down, you have x plus 2 quantity squared. And then you move your 5 over. Okay, what questions do you have?
I just keep forgetting one little thing every time.
The same thing?
Different things.
Different things. That's okay. That's okay. I'm not asking anybody to be perfect today. Okay, here's what I want to do. We have, what time are we done? 42. So we have 20 minutes. Perfect. I'm giving you 3 problems in 20 minutes. I want to go over these 3 today just so we can make sure we're doing well. And then tomorrow is just a work day on all of this. So don't feel like, even if you're still messing up, it's okay. You were looking that way. You were looking that way. Yeah, you were. Like, just like that.
Maybe like, oh, what did you say?
Yeah.
Most of the time.
How did you get that?
I was. Sorry.
Okay, here are your 3 problems. I would like to go over these before we go so we can see how we do. There's a thing on the board.